been perfecting vegan Thanksgiving for years now, and I've got all the bases covered, so I'm going to share those recipes with you. Our menu today is going to include homemade turkey roast, which is easier to make than you think, delicious savory bread stuffing, which is Grandma's recipe that I just veganized, fluffy and creamy mashed potatoes, just like Grandma's, but without the dairy, and a fantastic holiday gravy, which everybody's going to love. The obligatory green bean casserole, made without the cans, and of course, everyone's favorite pumpkin pie that is completely dairy-free and so good. I'll even share a trick to help you make this vegan pumpkin pie taste just like your grandma, so the family won't even know the difference. You can make this whole meal, or just a dish to take to your family potluck. If you want all the recipes and a timeline for how to put this family Thanksgiving dinner together, I'll put a link in the description box below for a downloadable PDF, and I'll also share in that download my favorite fresh cranberry relish, which is really good with that turkey. We're going to start with a turkey roast today because unlike a regular turkey, this turkey gets better as it sets. So it's even good if you make it a week or a month ahead of time and put it in the freezer to make your Thanksgiving less stressful. So, as always, the ingredients will be all listed in the description box below and the full recipe there. You want to start with Vital Wheat gluten flour and then add some oats, some yeast flakes, some flour to add better texture to your dough. This is a chicken style seasoning that you can, and this is onion powder, and you don't want to miss any of the onion powder. It gives a good flavor. We're going to add poultry seasoning and garlic powder and some cayenne pepper, just a pinch. Oops, the cayenne pepper does not want to come out of this bowl, but we will not be dissuaded. We will get that cayenne pepper. And then we have some salt. We like a little zip in our turkey roast. Let's give a quick mix to that. If you do not have a stand mixer like I do, you can just stir it together with a spoon and then add your water. Once you add your water, you will get it mixing. Again, if you're not using a stand mixer, you're going to want to mix this by hand. And after a minute, it's going to make a nice thick dough, and you'll want to put it out on your counter and knead it like you knead bread, and just knead that for at least 5 to 10 minutes because you want to elongate all of those gluten fibers as you mix it. You can see after a little while it gets really thick and hard to mix. Even for the stand mixer, it's hard to mix. Just let it go for a little bit longer and then it's ready to go. Don't worry if the dough looks a little like it's gonna fall apart. It's fine, just push it all together, and then we're going to wrap that into some plastic wrap and stick it into the refrigerator. Go ahead and wrap it into plastic wrap. One of the reasons we like to make the turkey roast ahead of time is because of all these steps that require resting of the dough. So we're going to stick this into the refrigerator and we will check it on it the next day. You'll see that the dough is totally different the next morning and it stretches out so nicely. I like to make a big long snake out of it and tie it into knots. That elongates the gluten fibers and kind of mimics the fibers of a muscle meat. And I like to do that, and then I tie it all together, and it gives you different textures throughout the roast. And if you do not want to go through all the trouble of stretching this out and tying into knots, you can take that roast and wrap it really tight into a cheesecloth, and then you can put that into the broth that way. You do want to make sure that the roast is wrapped up tightly, whether you're doing it this way with the tying in knots or whether you're wrapping it in cheesecloth. You want it to be super tight because it will come apart in the broth otherwise, because it's going to be boiling in there for about an hour to an hour and a half. So tuck all those pieces under, make sure it's super tight, and then it's ready to go into the broth. Now we're going to make the broth. We start with our water, and then we will add some of the Bragg's liquid aminos, which gives a salty flavor. I like that better than the soy sauce, as I said before. And there's some onion powder and some onion. I like to use some fresh onion also because it gives a good flavor. I don't worry about chopping it small. I just chunk it up and throw it right into the broth. And then I'll give the broth a quick stir, and I will put it onto the stove and get it boiling. Once the broth is boiling, you want it to be at a rolling boil before you add your turkey roast. And then you want to let that boil for an hour to an hour and a half, and I stir that every once in a while to make sure that there's enough water in there and there's nothing sticking to the bottom, and it's all good. Once your turkey roast has boiled for an hour and a half, you can remove it from the heat and let it cool in its broth. I really think the turkey roast has a better texture and flavor if you let it sit overnight. So I would take that broth and roast and put it into the refrigerator, and it can stay there until you're ready to use it. This is great for Thanksgiving because you can make it a day or two ahead of time, or you can put it in the freezer and it will keep there in the freezer for several months. When it's time to serve this turkey roast, you're going to want to slice it thinly and put it into a crock pot with some of the broth. You can use any kind of no chicken broth, and you can keep it in the crock pot to keep it warm. You don't have to use your oven up, and that way you have plenty of room for all the other goodies that are going to be cooking in there. The next thing we want to make is the pumpkin pie, because it's one of those things you need to make ahead. It's going to need to be made on the day before you want to eat it, so it has time to cool. This pumpkin pie is super easy, but if you're not up for making the crust, there is a recipe for a pumpkin crunch, which is just like this pumpkin pie, except for with a crumble topping, and it makes a fantastic Thanksgiving dessert. I'll put that link in the description box below, but let's start making our pie. We will start with 1 box of silken tofu. I am using Mori-Nu brand. I really like it because it comes in a range of firmnesses, but if you do not have this brand, you will want 12 ounces of extra firm silken tofu. This recipe is super easy. We just put everything into the blender, dump in your tofu, and then we're going to add some milk. I am using Silk Next milk here, but you can use any other milk, and even coconut milk will make it a richer pie, but it will have a little bit of a coconut flavor. Add in the sugar, and then just 2 teaspoons of neutral oil, and you can use coconut oil here if you would like. Add some cinnamon, some pumpkin pie spice, and I do highly recommend that if your family has a favorite pumpkin pie recipe, you use those pumpkin seasonings in the ratio in this pie that you would in your traditional pie, and this pie will taste just like your traditional pie from childhood. Next, you will want to add in the agar-agar, which is a seaweed product that works a lot like a gelatin. You can find it easily online or at an international market, and it does give the pie the best pumpkin pie texture that you. Now go ahead and blend that up, and you will want to add your pumpkin. Make sure the pumpkin is pumpkin puree, not pumpkin pie mix, because the pumpkin pie mix already has sugar and spices in. You just want the pumpkin puree. Blend one more time until completely smooth. To go to the pie crust. I am using a pie crust recipe that I found on natashakitchen.com. I will link to her website down below. I simply replaced the butter that she used with Country Crock plant butter, and the crust came out very nicely. It was pretty easy to work with, and you can watch her video for some tips and tricks to use that crust. Pour that filling into the pie crust. This filling will fill a 9-inch deep pie pan. I'm currently using an 8-inch smaller pie pan, so I'm going to have a little leftover, which is great. Put that in the oven for about an hour, and make sure you follow the instructions carefully to make sure your pie is all done. Here it is, cooked and cooled, and we are ready to decorate. This is the look I was going for. I saw it in a magazine. I want to put a fluffy cloud of whipped cream with a bunch of cute little leaves. I have these cute little leaf cookie cutters, and I use them. I use the leftover pie crust, and I cut out these cute little leaves. I took a few extra minutes and made some small marks in the leaves so they looked like real leaves. which is an extra step that you do not have to do, but it does make it look pretty. So I decided to try Silk and Country Crock whipped cream to see which one was best. If you want to see how that came out, you can check the link below, or I'll put a card in the upper corner. I'm going to add the whipped cream to my pie, and which deflated a little bit in the fridge overnight. So if you are using the Country Crock whipped cream, I do highly recommend that you whip it the same day that you're serving the pie. If you want to see the whole video on that, again, it's in the description box below. I put on the little leaves, and let's see the difference between what I was going for and what I ended up with. I think I could have done much better if my whipped cream was fluffier, but I do think we have a beautiful pie. Now that the pumpkin pie is cooling, you can go ahead and make the stuffing. Now the stuffing you can make the night before, or my mother-in-law likes to make it ahead and freeze and just bake it the day of. So either way you want to do it, this is another one of those make-ahead recipes. I recently learned that not everybody has stuffing for Thanksgiving, which I thought was the craziest thing. They say it's a Southern thing, but we always had it at our table, and my husband always had it at his table. So let me know if you use stuffing at your Thanksgiving dinner. And if so, are you from the South, or where are you from? I feel really bad for you if you've never had the opportunity to eat Grandma's stuffing. But today, that's all going to change because I'll show you Grandma's recipe. To get started on the stuffing, you will need to break down the celery. I chop off both ends and then wash it really well. Celery tends to be dirty, so I give it a good wash, and then I chop it into small pieces. I like to use this handy-dandy little chopper, which makes perfect cuts without a lot of work. It's also a good way to get the kids to help you in the kitchen. All you have to do is put the big chunks of celery on the blades and give it a good whack. And in moments, you have a bunch of chopped celery for your stuffing. I also like to do my onions the same way. While I have the chopper out, I usually do a couple of extra onions so that I have them prepared for another meal. I chop it into small chunks and then put it on the chopper and give it a good whack. And again, a bunch of tiny perfect little pieces of onion. Now it's time to get out a large high-sided skillet and put it on medium heat. I'll add 1 stick or a half a cup of Country Crock plant butter. Any plant butter will do the trick as long as it tastes good. Once that is melted, I add 2 cups of onions and give it a quick stir. Before I put in 2 cups of celery. Keep that cooking until the onions are clear and the celery is softened. It will take about 7 to 8 minutes. Once that's done, I add a bag of Pepperidge Farm sage and onion stuffing mix and stir that well to coat all of the bread with the butter and the nice flavors of the onions and celery. Next, you'll add in some sage and some plant milk that is mixed with chicken style seasoning or some no chicken bouillon to give it a lot more flavor. Give that another stir because you want the bread cubes to get moistened. If you feel like it's too dry, you can add a little bit more plant milk, but do not add too much plant milk or the bread will be soggy and your stuffing will have a mushy texture, which is never good. I like to let that sit for a little while so that the bottom gets nice and brown, and then I flip it and brown the other side. Once that's all done, I put it into a serving dish. See those nice little bits of brown? That is a lot of flavor on that stuffing. I'll set this aside until almost time to eat, and then I'll pop it in the oven to crisp up the top. If you want more details on the freezing and thawing of that, you can download the PDF in the description box below. You can even make this stuffing into a whole different kind of dish for your Thanksgiving dinner. You can make it into a stuffing and turkey casserole by taking chunks of vegetarian turkey or vegetarian chicken and mixing it in with your stuffing, and it makes a nice casserole for a Thanksgiving main dish. Next up is the homemade green bean casserole, and it wouldn't be Thanksgiving without it. We're going to start by sauteing our onions in a large high-sided skillet. Add a little salt to those now so they start to release their liquid and cook a little faster. I just need to cook those for a few minutes until they get translucent. Now that our onions are cooked, we're going to go ahead and add our garlic. I'm also going to add mushrooms. These are baby Bella mushrooms. You can use white button mushrooms if you like. The last thing I need here is a little thyme. I'm going to let these cook until the mushrooms start to release their juices until a little bit of brown. That should only take a couple of minutes. I know what some of you are going to say. You're going to say you don't like mushrooms. Well, just so you know, cream of mushroom soup has mushrooms in it. So you're not going to taste it in this. Truth be told, I don't like mushrooms either, but I can almost drink this stuff. This is very good. And you can use it in any recipe that calls for cream of mushroom soup. To make the creamy sauce, we're going to add 1 cup of cashews. And I'm going to do 2 cups of water. I'm going to save the last cup of water to clean out the blender. It's my little trick to make sure that I get everything, all the goodies out of my blender. We're blending those cashews until they're completely smooth. No grittiness at all about them. So let's check it out. I like to stick my spoon in and see if I see any grittiness, which I don't. I'm going to go ahead and add some beef seasoning to this. Today I am using Better Than Bouillon no beef seasoning. You can also use a powdered beef seasoning like this one. I'll put it in the description box below. And I find that Better Than Bouillon is easy to find and it tastes great. So I've got a total of 3 cups of water. So I'm going to go put ahead and put in 3 teaspoons, which is about a tablespoon. All right, we're going to blend that one more time. While we were blending this up, our mushrooms got done, so let's go ahead and pour this into our mushrooms. It'll make a beautiful creamy mushroom sauce, mushroom gravy, cream of mushroom soup mix, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to thicken up quickly. I still need to add my other 1.5 cups of water. So I'm going to go ahead and dump that in and do a quick blend to clean up my blender. Got most of the stuff out of my blender. I'm going to add that to my pan. Now we just need to let this cook for a few minutes until it thickens up and makes a nice, rich, thick sauce that we'll add to our green bean casserole. I'm going to give this a quick taste and check it for salt. Sometimes it's saltier than others, so you need to try it before you add it to your green beans. Remember, your green beans are not salted, so you can have a little bit saltier than you normally have because the green beans will soak up some of that salt. You can see the sauce starting to bubble up and thicken up. We're going to let that cook for about a minute before we add our green beans. Our mushroom sauce is done. I'm going to go ahead and add my green beans. Today I am using frozen cooked green beans, but you can also use canned green beans. Fresh green beans are really good in this as well. So we need to just stir that sauce into the green beans. And then we are going to dump this into our sprayed dish. Now, I don't really know if it needs to be sprayed, but I do like to err on the side of less scrubbing of dishes. So let's dump this in. Let's go ahead and add our crispy French onions to the top. And because everything in here is already cooked and hot, it only needs to go into the oven enough to toast up these green onions. If you're making this ahead for a potluck, I would not add the onions until you're ready to serve. So go ahead and mix everything up and have it ready, and then put the onions and stick it in the oven at the last minute. So let's stick it in our oven. It's going to take about 10 minutes. If you want to be ahead of the game on this green bean casserole, you can make this mushroom gravy a few days ahead and then just throw this all together on Thanksgiving Day. One thing you can't make ahead is the mashed potatoes. The general rule of thumb is 1/2 pound potatoes per person. But if you're serving a mostly plant-based crowd, then you probably need a few more potatoes than that. You will want to start with a russet potato. The russet potato is the potato of choice for mashed potatoes. Red potatoes, white potatoes, yellow potatoes are all very waxy and heavier. They're good for other things, but they are not good for mashed potatoes. So grab a bag of russet potatoes, and you're going to want to make about 1/2 pound of potatoes per person, but I always make a little extra. So grab your potatoes, you're going to want to peel those nicely. You don't want to take out all the eyes of the potatoes and all the bad spots and chop those up and put them into a pan of water. You're going to put that pan of water onto the stove and bring it to a boil. Once it's boiling, it will cook for about 20 minutes, but it depends on the size of your potatoes. Test to see if it's done. You can stick a fork into that potato. If you stick a fork into the potato and it is soft, it is not necessarily ready. You want that potato to fall apart when you poke it with a fork. So take your fork, poke it into the potato, and if it falls apart, then you know it is the right doneness. When it's done, you can drain the water from the potatoes, and we're going to mash the potatoes right in the pan. So into this pan of potatoes, we are going to add some plant-based butter. I'm using Country Crock plant butter, which is one of my new favorites, and we are going to add some milk, and this is Silk Next milk. It is a whole milk substitute, and I really love it in mashed potatoes. We're going to use a hand mixer to mix these up and whip them into a nice fluffy mashed potato. If you do not have a hand mixer, you can hand mash these with a masher, but they will not be as fluffy. When I use the hand mixer, I mix it and I mix it and I mix it. I want to make sure they're fluffy and nice when we serve those, and then when you see that they're all nice and fluffy, you can transfer those to a serving dish and they will be ready to go. But then you need to make our gravy. So for our gravy, we're going to add our liquid ingredients all to 1 glass measuring cup so we can pour those in. So we're going to start with water, and then we're going to add some chicken style seasoning. I'm using a chicken style powdered seasoning with little Bragg's liquid aminos. Stir that together really well and put it aside until we're ready for it. Next thing you want to do is to get your Country Crock plant-based butter in a pan and start melting that. Once it's melted, you can add your all-purpose flour to the butter, and you're going to want to keep stirring that and make a nice roux and kind of cook that flour a little bit so you don't have a floury taste in your gravy. And then you want to add in some seasonings, your nutritional yeast flakes and your poultry seasoning. You want to add to that just a pinch of poultry seasoning and cook those seasonings down just for a minute before you start adding the liquid ingredients that are in that pitcher. You can pour that in. You'll want to use a whisk, and you're going to want to whisk while you're pouring it in so that you can avoid getting lumps in your gravy, and just keep stirring until it's all mixed in and all the liquid is in. And you can let that boil and for a few minutes until it thickens up a little bit. And once it does that, you can turn it off. And I like to add a couple tablespoons of milk. I'm still using the Silk Next milk here. I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of milk, and then I'll add some salt to taste as I need it. And then we have the perfect gravy. If you do not want to make your own gravy, this gravy mix here, Lehigh gravy that you can buy on Amazon, it is vegan and it is very tasty, and you will like that as well if you would like to take a little shortcut when you're making your mashed potatoes and gravy for Thanksgiving.
Everything we need for a delicious vegan Thanksgiving is ready. Here's everything we've made. We made a delicious vegan turkey roast from scratch, and we also made some creamy mashed potatoes with gravy, along with Grandma Warfel's holiday stuffing and a green bean casserole. But don't forget that pumpkin pie. I'm starting with dessert first.
Oh, it's so good. Most people have their own family traditions, but not everybody does. And so one of our favorite family traditions is to invite a friend or a neighbor or an acquaintance over who doesn't have a family to share Thanksgiving with. Maybe their family lives far away, or maybe they just never had a family that had these kind of traditions. You can always be something that someone else can be thankful for. So if you're going to be showing some of that good old-fashioned Southern hospitality, you might need a good recipe for macaroni and cheese. I hear it's a staple down south to have macaroni and cheese for Thanksgiving dinner. So here's my recipe for the best vegan macaroni and cheese.